Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas. And today I have three awesome guests with me, and we are starting a conversation that I think is really, really, really important about climate change and insurance potentially being a leader in this space. So today I have with me Skylar Holder. Did I get that right? Skylar, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Skylar Holder, who wrote a really awesome article in Team Vogue about this topic after her risk management major. I must say, I don't think I ever read an article in Teen Vogue until your article. So fantastic job on that. Then we have Kevin McComber, who is an MIT grad and fellow CPCU, spent 3 years in our industry, during which he noticed some things that we could do better and started helping the industry improve. And finally, Mary Sweeters with Insure Our Futures, part of the Sunshine Project. So I kind of did the intros real quick, since we have somewhat limited time today and there's four of us. But Skylar, I'd love to start with the article. How did you end up writing it? What led you to it? And I'll include the links to every article we mentioned, but I'm really curious how it happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ultimate thing that held me up and helped me write the article was with the help of the Insure Our Future campaign. I worked with writers there. I told them I had an idea, a message to get across, and they supported me through that. I just, overall, the purpose of the article was to educate and inform students about, insurance students specifically, about a problem that they may not have known that existed. Put a different perspective on the industry, talking about how coal and fossil fuels, these industries, these projects, they wouldn't exist, so they wouldn't be supported without insurance carrying them. So I just wanted to shine a light and maybe show a voice in talking about how these industries need to be called out and that insurance is a part of the problem.
And I'll be honest. I've been here for 11 years. I'm a giant insurance nerd. I think that I understand insurance fairly well. And when the first time that I chatted with Mary, my perspective was entirely we should stop investing in dirty fuels. I have no idea how much we do invest. I did know that insurance is one of the big institutional investors. I didn't know quite how big, and I figured over time we should stop investing in that. But I hadn't even ever thought of the underwriting side.
Exactly. Yeah, the projects wouldn't exist without the underwriting aspect.
100%. And I think even if you work in insurance, unless you've been here for a long time, you don't realize that if nobody will underwrite it, it's impossible to do, basically, at least in the developed world.
Exactly.
So I think that it is crucial for us to, as an industry, to realize the power that gives us. And I'm not saying that we should flex our muscle on anything we disagree with, but on the case of climate change, it's a big deal. It's a very, very big deal. And I'm an older millennial, and generationally speaking, all the research says that we are concerned as a generation about climate change, and that most millennials understand that this is science, even if in the States it's been heavily politicized. And if I understand correctly, Gen Zers, which is your generation, even more than that, right? You guys are more than clear. Is that what you saw in school? Were most of your classmates kind of clear on the science?
It was no contest. It's like we came out of the womb knowing that it was a thing, knowing that we would have to deal with it. It was never a convincing argument. We just knew it was there, knew it was a problem. And I think that's true across the board that I saw in school. There was absolutely no contest about it.
And did you go to school in Houston? Or I think you live in Houston now.
No. I'm originally from Houston. I graduated from the University of North Texas, which is in Denton, Texas.
Okay. So even in conservative Texas, Gen Zers, in your experience, are understand that this is science.
Even in conservative Texas. I mean, you'll see that even in red states. Gen Z, right? You come through and you speak to people in that generation. One, they come across as wanting more ethical practices from companies. They're willing to pay more for products that are more sustainably sourced, and they're looking for conscious capitalism. They just want companies to be transparent. They want them to do the right things, and they're willing to lay down sacrifices and even pay more as consumers to get those things that they're expecting.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me.
I think there was even a study that insurance employees, or maybe it was just millennials, Mary, you probably have the exact data, like 44% of millennials said they would actually take a pay decrease to work for a company that is, proactive on sustainability and climate change. So not only consumers, but also just employees and their paychecks.
That is very interesting. I'm assuming no insurance specific numbers exist on that, but what I can tell you is that this is an incredibly tight labor market, and your boom within insurance, right? 2.2% unemployment as we record today, even though we're in the middle of the COVID recession, and your boomers are retiring, right? So that's leaving you with very pragmatic Gen Xers. And very, very, I don't even want to say liberal or conservative, and two generations that understand that this is science. And millennials especially were raised to do something good for the world. So it's definitely a plus. And I would love to see us get to a point as a generation where we start flexing our muscle in our industry. So Kevin, you came into the industry from an MIT degree and with no insurance experience.
Yeah.
Tell us about your experience coming in and that first project that got you thinking about that accidentally showed you that insurance could do more.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background was in semiconductors. I worked for Intel making computer chips for a number of years in a process engineering role. And then my wife and I had a baby, moved back to the Boston area, and through some connections, I ended up landing a job with a large multinational carrier based in Boston in a process engineering role as well, but on the claims side. And it was actually just by seeing some operations that weren't, I'd say, it was a lot of waste, and that was really my job, was to eliminate waste. I was seeing foam piling up in the cafeteria, and that kind of thing. Just, I'd never really been super conscious about environmental impacts, but it just seemed like absolute waste, especially when we were in a building that was LEED Silver certified. So I felt like we needed to take action, and I'd seen other companies like in the tech space pretty quickly follow something that's kind of a morally right. So I figured insurance maybe would, but maybe wouldn't. And I, just to compare the two industries, when I was working at Intel, we had process engineering documents for our technicians who were running the machines that were several hundred pages long, and we changed them every week. No problem. In insurance, we had a 20-page operating procedure for our claims folks that we changed about every quarter, and we got a lot of pushback, right? So that was kind of the difference in mentality, like a total different pace. And when we started approaching folks within the company about, making some sort of a statement about sustainability or climate change, generally got nodding heads, but mostly we were met with crickets. And that kind of thing just didn't sit well with me. I really saw, like you mentioned, a leadership opportunity, like you see in tech, where someone like an Amazon comes out and says, we're making a climate pledge. We're going to be carbon neutral by 2040, 10 years in advance of the Paris Climate Agreement. That kind of thing strikes a chord with millennials. And insurers are trying to recruit people from the likes of Amazon, because insurers are recognizing there's a big opportunity in tech on the claims side, on the underwriting side, AI, all that kind of stuff. They're trying to get that talent. Amazon can make a statement like that. Shouldn't we as insurers be able to make a statement like that and come out ahead and take a leadership role? Unfortunately, it met with a good amount of resistance. I can understand it. Insurance plays a pretty foundational role in society. To change something in insurance and therefore change something that underpins a large portion of society can be a big challenge. So I think they're a little bit loath maybe to make, a pretty large pronouncement like that. But I am hopeful, and we're seeing a lot of good signs in Europe first, as well as now in the U.S. The U.S. does lag Europe, but I'm hopeful that we will see that kind of change here, because the war for talent, like you said, is real, and we're competing with tech companies now. So it's really getting hot in that space, and I think that insurers are going to have no other choice if they really want to attract folks like Scholar to their companies.
You bring up a fantastic point, which is we want tech talent. We need tech talent, right? It's not all we need, but it's one of the hardest ones to get. The Jacobson Ward survey of insurance hiring, which you do every 6 months, every time the hardest talent to find is tech talent and other analytics talent, tech actuarial and analytics. And from the demographic perspective, everything I'm reading implies that, or very strongly implies that you can't just go, oh, that's crazy tech workers. They'll, right, like, we don't need that many of them. We can find the ones that don't mind, but really, like, it's going to spread to through the rest of the workforce as the boomers retire and you have a younger.
Absolutely. You have a younger population coming in, and we also have these what I call digital first startups, right? Like a Lemonade coming in, process a claim in 3 seconds using AI. That kind of stuff is going to eat the lunch of the bigger insurers, and they know it. I was in corporate strategy for a couple of years, and that kind of stuff really does scare larger insurers. So you need to hire that talent to kind of, stave off the compete with the new entrants, as well as just to replace the incumbent workforce. So you're really getting it from both sides, and it's going to be a crunch. You don't want to be picking the bottom of the barrel after the Googles and Amazons have had their ways. You really want to be first and foremost, and to do that, you have to not only attract the minds but also the hearts of millennials and Gen Zers, and that's going to happen by taking a leadership mentality on something that's very important to these generations.
And it makes sense on so many levels. Like, you are, if you're underwriting, oil pipelines or coal mines, you're costing yourself future losses on the property side, and maybe even on the liability side if the courts start falling on that side. Mary. I think that you're probably the one that's closest to this. Tell us about the progress in Europe and how we could copy that in the States.
Yeah, I was thinking about this when Kevin mentioned it earlier, that there's precedent for this worldwide. At this point, we mentioned before, the insurance industry is a major institutional investor, right? It's not just the underwriting side. I think, Tony, you said, one of the first things you thought about was the fact that these insurance companies invest billions and billions of dollars, including into the fossil fuel industry. But a number of insurers have recognized this worldwide. At this point, over 60 insurers have adopted some sort of divestment policy or a policy to make no new investments into fossil fuels. Primarily, this is focused on coal. Sometimes it also includes things like tar sands or other parts of the oil and gas sector. So that's a huge number of insurers worldwide that have adopted those kinds of policies. Unfortunately, in the U.S., the U.S. insurance industry is quite far behind, and just a handful have adopted any kinds of divestment policies. And on the underwriting side, at this point, over 30 insurance companies and reinsurance companies have adopted policies to restrict the underwriting that they will provide for coal. Again, it's mostly focused on coal, tar sands, but even some have also started to expand into other parts of the oil and gas sector. So I think there's a growing recognition of the risks of being heavily exposed to fossil fuels on the investment underwriting side, and there's this recognition of what we're talking about, where in order to recruit and retain some of the best talent, as the workforce expectation on insurance companies shifts, and people are expecting that their companies will respond to the threats of climate change and sort of take some responsibility for it, that companies are seeing this and are starting to take notice. In addition to the financial incentives, I think there have been increasing analyses that have come out around insurers. For example, I think Societe Generale had a report out a month or two ago that showed that stock valuation for insurers that exited the coal sector went up. Moody's has also shown that it's better for insurers to exit the coal sector in terms of like credit risk. So, there's a lot of, I think, factors there that insurers, primarily outside of the U.S., are recognizing. And I think there's a real leadership opportunity now for U.S. insurers to kind of step into that gap.
What can we do as employees of insurance companies? So my perspective is realize your value, realize the rarity of your experience, and then don't be afraid to flex that muscle. First by asking for changes, and then by going to the to work at the places that are actually doing it. That's my perspective. What have you guys think? What do you guys think? And what have you guys seen that is working?
I can speak from my experience. Starting this kind of internal employee group at this large insurer, it was just a snowball effect. I was literally standing around with 5 other people at a company outing one summer, and we were talking about how much waste there was in the cafeteria. One thing led to another. We were knocking on doors, asking if we could improve that. We started a little internal, we kind of have like an internal Facebook, internal social media group, swelled to over 100 people. We set up a board. Now, I no longer work there, but my understanding is it's over 800 people in that group now. So just kind of providing that seed if it's not there already. And then once it's there, talking to your fellow employees and getting together a critical mass that can try to grow an internal movement. And I think we were also careful with how we portrayed ourselves to the leadership of the company. It was, like I'm saying, to take a leadership role, to work with them, to try to make the company better, improve its profitability, improve its employee engagement, improve its recruiting. It's not, attacking leadership because they haven't done something. It's helping them to improve the company. And that was, I think, the key really to coming at it from the right angle. And I truly did believe that there was that opportunity, so it was an easy sell.
Yeah, I would say not necessarily as an employee, but say from the student perspective. So I don't think there's any shame in critical or asking the right questions, especially for a prospective employer. I don't think wanting reform or wanting the company that you want to work for to be better necessarily deters candidates, but almost makes your company more attainable to people who want to work there. So I would say that, if at conventions, when you're trying to make that 30-second elevator speech, you're trying to impress that recruiter, get your foot in the door, asking the right questions. I mean, it used to be asking about diversity and inclusion. How diverse is your company? What are you doing to show that you're inclusive? Now it could be, what kind of green policies do you have? Ask about if they have any policies regarding coal or fossil fuels. Even if it's in an interview setting, I mean, they always tell you to ask questions at the end of an interview. I mean, you can ask what the work environment is, and you can also ask about what the company is doing to be more sustainable. It should become more normal to start asking those questions, rather than just surface level questions now as they are about diversity and inclusion. I mean, that's that's routine now. So throw different ones in there, and then if it's the right company and they respect you enough as a candidate, I mean, that should almost put you at the top because you're asking different questions compared to other people that they're interviewing.
I can definitely tell you from the staffing perspective, if I have candidates asking me the same thing, it gets noticed, right? Those are the kind of things that internally, when we're hiring, we discuss. Hey, we should have a plan for that because it keeps coming up over and over in the interviews, and it's affecting our ability to get the candidates we want.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'll chime in too and say that I talk to insurance professionals sort of across the industry. I've probably at this point talked to folks from 7 or 8 different major insurance companies who are all concerned about climate change and who want to see more from their employer. And I think some of them are sort of in the process of seeking out other colleagues that they can talk to and figure out like, hey, what is the best way, as Kevin described it, what's the best way that we can, advocate internally to the company? How can we demonstrate that we really care about this? Others, actually, like both Kevin and Skylar, are even writing kind of pieces to kind of share their concerns and maybe make some suggestions and bring some solutions forward to the industry more broadly. In fact, actually, just today, a senior underwriter based in California wrote a piece, I think, in Property Casualty 360 about, what can the insurance industry do? So I think, there's certainly an increasing number of employees who are sort of recognizing this issue and seeing where there's both responsibility and opportunity for the insurance industry to step forward, and are starting to have some of those internal conversations and try to bring things forward, which I think is really heartening.
And Tony, if I could come at it from the other side, kind of from the top, I think a number of your listeners are probably executives in insurance companies. One thing that I learned in process engineering, especially in semiconductors, was always listen to your people, because that's where really good ideas come from. And that was one thing that really irked me when I came to the leadership of my company with some ideas. We kind of got the silent treatment and cold shoulder. So really, please do listen to your employees and try to understand what they're saying. And if they're coming to you with something that could improve the company, let's dig into it, right? Let's get after it, because that's going to not only hopefully improve the company, but it would also significantly improve employee retention, morale, if you home grow something that is meaningful to your employees.
Makes sense, and I think that the generational piece plays big into it, and I think that's something for both sides, both the leadership and just the employees to understand. Sometimes change happens one retirement at a time, and very often change happens little by little and then all at once, right? So I think that as the silver tsunami keeps hitting us, all of a sudden Gen Xers are inheriting the positions of power. The right person just moved on, and now the ground is fertile for change that speaks to that new leadership. So keeping an eye on those leadership changes and getting in front of them, getting in front of the right people that are likely to get those big promotions, putting them in places where they can really make changes, having them on your side before they get the promotion.
And I also want to point out, there are a lot of folks who are not millennials and not Gen Zers who are extremely supportive, of having a leadership position, and they're in positions of leadership. But one thing I learned, we had 40 some odd thousand employees and thousands of leaders, right? You can have a lot of people who want to do it, but if there are strong voices in the room who are opposing it, the people who really want to do it are often going to get silenced. And it's an extremely complex task to try to do something of this magnitude, especially in a company that big, with, like you mentioned, all the politics and the things around it that scare a lot of folks from taking a position. So I think sometimes we tend to think like, oh, the company can just make this decision, but there's so much internally and stakeholders that is actually very complex, let alone the actual business implementation of taking some sort of a stance, but the actual just decision to make it can be exceedingly complex. And I don't think it has to come just from younger generations. There are folks who have been at companies for decades who are very, very interested in this too. And I would definitely want to have them at the table because I think that they're an exceedingly important part of this puzzle.
Sorry, I can attest to that. I went to a protest in front of a particular insurer's building, and half of the group were 40, 50 years older than I was, and I didn't even recognize them as part of the group initially. I just thought they were just innocent bystanders caught in our chants. But no, they were actively a part of the group, which was super awesome to see. It was crazy.
Yeah. Is there a playbook? Is there a set of resources for people who want to bring change to their company? It's kind of an open question. I'm kind of looking at Mary, but it's an open question.
Sure, I can take a stab at that. I think so. The Insure Our Future initiative, which is composed of a number of NGOs worldwide, including several here in the United States, has provided developed some resources. Just I think primarily the first step for employees who are concerned about climate change and maybe aren't entirely familiar with how the insurance industry is sort of contributing to the issue. Many folks recognize increasingly that, of course, climate change is affecting the insurance industry, but that there's also kind of that reverse relationship that we've been talking about through underwriting and investments. So, I think, and I can share some of these links, Tony, if you want to, include them, but we put out an annual scorecard that looks at about 30 global insurance companies and kind of compares them on some of their sustainability issues around fossil fuel underwriting and investments, and maybe some of their other stewardship behaviors. Insurance-scorecard.com is actually the URL for the most recent scorecard, and that came out in December 2020. It's sort of an interactive table you can kind of look at if you work, one of the companies is one of your own that you work for example. You can kind of go in and see a little bit more detail about how they got the score that they did. Spoiler alert, many have a long way to go. There's certainly a gap, I think, as we mentioned before, between insurers outside of the U.S., mostly in Europe. Some in Australia have also taken some good steps forward. And unfortunately, like we mentioned before, most of the U.S. insurers, unfortunately, are lagging quite far behind, but I think have that real leadership potential. So that's definitely one place for employees to go just to kind of get a little bit more oriented to what is this issue? What does this look like? And then I can provide some other resources for employees as well, just to kind of get themselves a little bit more oriented to the issue, and potentially, talk with folks, support folks with, ideas and ways to kind of approach this productively within their workplace.
Okay, so that's the basic lay of the land, basically. Much more to come from Insurance Nerds and Sunshine Project and Insure Our Futures on this topic. But I encourage all the listeners to lead. And by the way, I just thought of this. I made a career for myself on being a unelected leader, on being a leader without a job title, on the issue of engaging the younger professionals within our industry, and it worked out really well. I can definitely see others who over time can make a career for themselves as the person who, or the set of people who led our industry to clean up their act, or to lead in the climate change war. I think that would be a very attractive place to be at 10, 15 years from now, is to have been a leader on this, whether you had the title or not.
Absolutely. What a legacy, right? To say that you did that. That would be fantastic.
Exactly. So that's all I've got for now. Thank you everybody for joining. We'll include quite a bunch of links in the show notes when this goes live. Kevin, Skylar, and Mary, thank you so much for joining me today. Keep up the good fight. It is so important. And I really, in the long term, I really can't think of anything more important as an industry that we need to figure out.
Agreed. Absolutely. Thanks for bringing up this topic.
Yeah, thank you.